I do what I do. I teach English to AP students and regular seniors at Cardozo High School. This is my 40th year teaching. I've been at Cardozo for 33 years now. And the reason I do it is because I love every day of it. It's always fun. I love teaching. I love teaching literature. I love teaching Gaines. I started studying Gaines when I was in graduate school in 1989, before A Lesson Before Dying. When I came back, that was in the summer program. When I came back, I started with the Penn Faulkner Writers in Schools program. If you're not familiar with that, what it does is it brings authors to the schools. The students get their books for free, and we study and then the author comes. So the students get a chance to meet a living author, which for some of us of certain ages, we never studied living authors when we were in school at all. We never studied authors of color. The only female author I ever studied when I was in high school, now I grew up before you in Norfolk, Virginia. They closed my junior high school in the 9th grade in 1959 rather than integrate in Norfolk. Norfolk was one of the cities in Virginia that closed the schools rather than integrate. So that for my first semester of my 9th grade year, we went to basement church schools because none of the public schools were open. Then the federal government moved in, and they got I think it was called, it wasn't massive resistance, but it was some other name for it. So when I graduated from high school, we had around 2,400 students in the school, and we had one black student, which means we had 2,399 white students. And that was integration in Norfolk in 1962 when I graduated. So the only female author that I read when I was in high school was George Eliot, which for those of us who are English teachers has a bit of irony attached to it, since she had to publish under a man's name in order to get her books published back in those days. That was Silas Marner, if any of you have ever read that. But when I started with the Writers in Schools program, my first writer was Susan Richard Shreve, who's a published novelist, a local novelist. My second author was Edward P. Jones, and my third author was Ernest J. Gaines. And I had studied him in my graduate program. One of my professors was a Gaines fan, and so we spent the whole summer studying Gaines's works. Not A Lesson Before Dying, because it hadn't been published yet. And so I begged the people in the Writers in School. I was just a new person, and that was in 1993. Now I'm an old person in it, and I can sort of get any author that I want. But I begged them to let me have Gaines. We didn't read the book because my students got A Lesson Before Dying in hardback before it was published. So they read the book before it was on any Barnes & Noble store. And it was fascinating. This was before the movie and before everything else. So, and we got to meet Gaines, which was one of the big moments in my life as a teacher. And he met the students and talked to the students about the book and everything like that. Just a reminder, on the 29th of April at Cardozo, we're going to have a seminar symposium on A Lesson Before Dying. I've invited 3 authors to come and talk about Gaines and A Lesson Before Dying. It's at 9 o'clock at Cardozo High School. That's 1200 Clifton Street, Northwest. If you'd like to come, you're all invited. We will have around 60 students participating in a question and answer session after the authors. And the authors are Yolanda Young, who's a memoirist and also a columnist for USA Today, You may have seen her, but she's from Louisiana. She's going to talk about Louisiana. E. Ethelbert Miller, who's a famous local, he's local, so he's not just local, but he lives here, and a poet and novelist and writer. We'll talk about Gaines's influence, literary influences, and then Patty Griffith, who's one of the board members of the Penn Faulkner Society, is going to talk about sort of critical looks at Gaines's work. Now that sounds pretty highfalutin, but it's not. We'll just have questions about the book from the students and everything like that. So you're all invited to come to that. It should be fun. Now we've just started reading A Lesson Before Dying in the classroom. The first question the students have is, how can they arrest him for something that he didn't do? And then, so that was what kicked off our discussion. How can they arrest him for something he didn't do? Because our students have a woeful lack of historical knowledge, right? The fact that a black young man is arrested in Louisiana in the 1940s when a white person dies is not, unfortunately, something that's not commonplace at all. Which you mentioned about, I think you mentioned about the shooting that we had a couple of weeks ago. I mean, here's a 14-year-old kid that's got 41 charges, a bunch of murder charges and all kinds of charges, who's probably never going to see the light of day again in his life. And he's 14 years old and had a criminal record to start. All right, Jefferson didn't have a lot going for him in his life. As we can see, I'm sure you're all familiar with the book, one of the most touching and rewarding parts of the book are Jefferson's notebooks. When he that Grant reads close, I don't know if it's chapter 23, it might be, but when he reads what Jefferson has written and really understands one of the lessons before dying. If you can't tell why I do what I do now, then I can't really talk too much more about it. But I do want to read a selection. Is that okay?